Joe Rogan ordered pizza every Friday for 2 years from the same place. Tony always delivered, reliable guy who never asked for tips or selfies. Until that Friday when Joe mentioned his upcoming podcast about drug legalization. Tony's expression changed completely. "Mr. Rogan, be very careful what you say about the war on drugs. Some DEA operations are more complex than people realize." Welcome to The Human Stories. Before we dive into Joe Rogan's pizza guy who was actually undercover DEA, smash subscribe. Have you ever suspected someone wasn't who they claimed to be? Austin, Texas. Joe's home. 8:30 p.m. Joe opened the door expecting his usual pepperoni pizza. Tony stood there with the familiar red delivery bag, same guy who'd been bringing his Friday dinner for 2 years. "Hey Tony, how's business?" "Good, Mr. Rogan. That'll be $18.50. As Joe paid, he mentioned his weekend plans. "Got an interesting podcast Monday. Guy who wants to legalize all drugs. Should be controversial." Tony's friendly demeanor shifted. He glanced around nervously. "What kind of legalization?" "Everything. Says the war on drugs is a complete failure. Wastes billions, destroys lives." Tony set down the pizza bag. "Mr. Rogan, be very careful what you say about the war on drugs. Some DEA operations are more complex than people realize." Joe paused, money halfway to Tony's hand. "How would you know about DEA operations?" I read the news." "Tony, that was a really specific thing to say. You sounded like you know something about drug enforcement." Tony looked around Joe's quiet neighborhood. "Can we talk inside?" "Sure." They walked into Joe's kitchen. Tony's whole body language had changed. More alert, more professional. "Mr. Rogan, my name isn't Tony Ricci. It's Agent Anthony Rodriguez, DEA Undercover Operations. I've been delivering pizza as cover for a 5-year investigation." Joe stared at him. "You're DEA. Deep undercover. And your podcast guest Monday is about to compromise an operation that's taken us half a decade to build. My pizza delivery guy is a federal agent? Was a federal agent. I'm about to blow my own cover to prevent a disaster." Tony sat at Joe's kitchen counter. "The guy you're interviewing Monday, Dr. Marcus Webb?" "Yeah, criminal justice professor who wants to end drug prohibition." "Dr. Webb isn't just an academic. He's been laundering money for the largest fentanyl operation in North America." Joe felt the room spinning. "What?" "For 5 years, I've been building a case against the Mendoza Cartel. Webb has been their financial architect, using his university position to legitimize drug money." "That's impossible. The guy's written books about criminal justice reform." Tony pulled out his phone and showed Joe surveillance photos. "This is Webb meeting with cartel leadership in Mexico last month." The photos clearly showed Joe's upcoming guest shaking hands with men who looked like serious criminals. "If Webb goes on your podcast and advocates for drug legalization, it's not because he believes in reform. It's because he wants to make his cartel clients' business legal." Joe stared at the evidence. "Tony, if you're really DEA, why have you been delivering my pizza for 2 years?" "Because you live 3 blocks from Webb's house. Your neighborhood has been our surveillance hub." "You've been watching my neighbor?" "We've been watching Webb. Your pizza orders gave me legitimate reason to be in the area twice a week." Joe looked at Tony differently now. "How much of our friendship was real?" "All of it, Joe. You're a good guy who got caught in the middle of a federal investigation." "And if I do this interview anyway?" "Then you'll be giving 50 million people propaganda created by drug cartels. Webb will use your platform to build public support for policies that help criminals." Tony showed Joe financial records. "This is 200 million in cartel money that Webb has laundered through academic conferences, research grants, and policy advocacy." "Jesus, why hasn't he been arrested?" "Because we need the entire network. Webb is small fish. We're after the people who are killing Americans with fentanyl. And my podcast could ruin that. If Webb gets public sympathy as a reform advocate, it becomes politically impossible to prosecute him." Joe looked at the evidence spread across his counter. "Tony, what do you need me to do?" "Cancel the interview, or let us use it to gather final evidence against him. Use my podcast for a DEA operation? We need Webb to incriminate himself on record. If you ask the right questions, he'll reveal information that completes our case. Tony pulled out a list of topics. These questions will make him talk about his cartel connections without him realizing it. Joe read the list. This is asking him to basically confess to money laundering. He won't see it that way. Webb thinks he's smarter than everyone else. His ego will make him brag about his consulting work. And if I refuse, then we arrest Webb tomorrow and lose the chance to get the bigger fish. 50 cartel members walk free. Joe paced his kitchen. Tony, this puts me in an impossible position. I know. But Webb is responsible for deaths, Joe. The money he laundered bought fentanyl that killed thousands of Americans. How do I know you're telling the truth? Tony made a phone call. Agent Rodriguez requesting verification for civilian asset. He handed Joe the phone. A woman's voice said, Mr. Rogan, this is DEA Assistant Director Sarah Martinez. Agent Rodriguez is conducting an authorized undercover operation. Joe handed back the phone. This is really happening. Webb's flight lands in 4 hours. We need your decision. What happens to you after this? My cover's blown. 5 years of deep undercover work ends tonight. Why are you willing to sacrifice that? Because saving lives is more important than protecting operations. Tony gathered his evidence. Joe, I've been watching you for 2 years. You ask tough questions because you want truth. This is your chance to expose a real criminal. Instead of just another controversial guest. Instead of giving a platform to cartel propaganda. Joe made his decision. Okay, we do this. But I want guarantees that Webb gets arrested immediately after the interview. Deal. And I want the whole story. If I'm risking my reputation, I deserve to know everything. Tony smiled. Joe, you're about to help take down one of the most dangerous drug operations in American history. And my pizza delivery guy was a federal agent the whole time. Best cover identity ever. Who suspects the pizza guy? Monday afternoon, Dr. Marcus Webb sat across from Joe in the studio. Distinguished academic, author of 3 books on criminal justice reform, completely unaware he was about to be exposed. Tony was in the control room, monitoring every word. Dr. Webb, tell me why you think all drugs should be legalized, Joe said. Joe, prohibition has been a complete failure. We spend billions persecuting non-violent drug users while real criminals profit from black markets. Joe glanced at Tony, who nodded encouragingly. What kind of real criminals? Well, the current system creates artificial scarcity that allows cartels to charge enormous profits. If we legalized and regulated drugs, we'd eliminate their revenue streams. You seem to know a lot about cartel economics. Webb's expression flickered slightly. I've done extensive research on drug market dynamics. What kind of research? Academic research. Analyzing financial flows, studying distribution networks, understanding how prohibition creates profit incentives. Tony held up a sign. Ask about Mexico. Have you done any of this research in Mexico? Webb paused too long. I've attended conferences there. What kind of conferences? Academic conferences on drug policy reform. Joe pulled out one of Tony's surveillance photos. Is this you at an academic conference? The photo showed Webb with known cartel members. Webb's face went white. Where did you get that? Someone sent it to me. Dr. Webb, these don't look like academics. Joe, I think there's been some misunderstanding. The misunderstanding is thinking I'm stupid. Joe held up financial records. $200 million in research funding from very generous benefactors. Webb stood up. This interview is over. Sit down, Dr. Webb. We're just getting started. The studio door opened. Tony walked in, no longer wearing a pizza delivery uniform. Professional clothes, DEA badge visible. Dr. Marcus Webb, you're under arrest for money laundering and conspiracy to distribute controlled substances. Webb stared in shock. Who are you? Agent Anthony Rodriguez, Drug Enforcement Administration. You have the right to remain silent. Webb looked at Joe, then at Tony. This is a setup. This is justice, Tony said, putting Webb in handcuffs. Joe, you have to understand, I was trying to reform a broken system. By laundering money for the people who are breaking it? Webb was led away in handcuffs as 50 million people watched live. After Webb was arrested, Joe and Tony sat in the empty studio. Well, that was intense, Joe said. 5 years of work just paid off. Webb's arrest will trigger raids across 3 countries. And my pizza delivery guy turns out to be a federal agent. Tony smiled. Best part of the job was actually delivering your pizza. You tip well. How much of this neighborhood surveillance was real? All of it. We had eyes on Webb 24 hours a day. Your house became our unofficial command post. Joe looked at the surveillance equipment Tony had hidden around his property. This is crazy. Joe, what you did today will save lives. Webb's network was responsible for moving tons of fentanyl into American communities. How many people are we talking about? Conservative estimate? His money laundering enabled distribution of drugs that killed over 3,000 Americans. Joe felt the weight of that number. Jesus. And now his whole network is compromised. We'll arrest 50 people in the next week. What happens to you now? New identity, new assignment. Can't do undercover work in Texas anymore. Will I see you again? Probably not. But you'll know that somewhere, Agent Rodriguez is still fighting the real war on drugs. Joe's phone buzzed with news alerts. Webb's arrest was already going viral. Tony, can I ask you something? Sure. In 2 years of delivering pizza, did you ever suspect I was involved in anything illegal? Tony laughed. Joe, your biggest crime is ordering pineapple pizza that one time. That was a dark period. Seriously though, you're exactly who you appear to be. That's rare in my line of work. They walked outside where federal agents were loading Webb into a van. One more question, Joe said. Yeah? Are there other federal agents working regular jobs in my neighborhood? Tony smiled. Joe, if I told you that, it wouldn't be undercover anymore. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting. As the federal convoy drove away, Joe realized he'd never look at service workers the same way again. 6 months later, Joe got a pizza delivery from a new guy. Young, nervous, kept asking about the podcasting business. Joe signed for his pizza and said, "Let me guess. DEA, FBI, CIA?" The delivery guy went pale. "I don't know what you mean, sir." "Right. What's your real name, Agent Smith?" "It's actually Agent Johnson, but how did you—" Joe smiled. "Experience. What are you investigating this time?" "I can't discuss ongoing operations. Let me help you out. If you're watching my neighbor Bob, he's growing marijuana in his basement. If you're watching Sarah across the street, she's running a tax evasion scheme. If you're here about me, I pay my taxes and don't do drugs." Agent Johnson looked confused. "Sir, I really am just delivering pizza." "Sure you are. Tell your supervisor that Joe Rogan is happy to cooperate with legitimate law enforcement operations, but next time just ask instead of pretending to deliver food for months." "Mr. Rogan, you're being paranoid." "Kid, my last pizza guy arrested a drug money launderer on live television. Paranoid is my new normal." The next week, Joe got a call from DEA Assistant Director Martinez. "Mr. Rogan, we need your help again." "Let me guess. My mailman is actually ATF?" "Your landscaper is FBI, but that's a different case." Joe laughed. "What do you need?" "Your neighbor 3 houses down is trafficking weapons. We need surveillance position." "Will this involve another fake service worker befriending me for years?" "Actually, we were hoping you'd just let us use your guest bedroom. Now we're getting somewhere. What's in it for me?" "Exclusive story rights after we make arrests." "Deal. But I'm done with fake pizza guys. If you need cover, just tell me you're federal agents." "Mr. Rogan, you realize most civilians don't react this calmly to federal investigations?" "Most civilians don't have podcasts that accidentally become sting operations." 2 years later, Joe's neighborhood had been cleared of 3 major criminal operations, all discovered through federal agents posing as service workers. Joe never knew which delivery drivers, repair technicians, or landscapers were actually law enforcement, but he'd learned to appreciate their dedication to protecting communities. Some neighbors complain about federal surveillance. Others realize that sometimes the people keeping you safe are hiding in plain sight. Have you ever suspected someone in your daily life wasn't who they claim to be? Share your story and subscribe for more hidden heroes protecting America. Sometimes the most important law enforcement happens over pizza delivery.